Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session, Flotilla Division Financial Procedures. I'm Mark D8ER. I'm the District Staff Officer for Finance here in D8ER, and I'm glad to be able to spend a few minutes with you this morning talking about finances. Some background: I joined the Auxiliary in July of 1976. Currently, I'm the District Staff Officer for Finance. I'm also the Flotilla Staff Officer for my Flotilla 4-3 down in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm also a member of the national staff. I work in the Auxiliary Association with the national staff designation as well. My highest past offices on the elected side, I served as District Chief of Staff from 1987 to 88. And I was privileged to serve as the National Commodore's aide for 3 National Commodores in the 1990s as well. In my civilian life, I'm Vice President and Senior Consultant at ProBank Austin. We're a bank consulting firm located in Louisville, Kentucky. We provide training and consulting to community-sized financial institutions, banks, savings loans, and credit unions. And I've been doing that since 1996 as well. So, some goals for our program today. Obviously, we want all of our units to have a bank account to be able to deposit their dues monies and their other income and receipts. We will establish those at a bank and a credit union. So I just want to talk about the establishment of accounts and the utilization and the ability to utilize the national employer identification number that the Auxiliary had assigned by the IRS years ago. Very important, most of our units' revenue, the bulk of such, comes from our dues that we collect. And so I want to talk about dues structures and timing because it is dues time. It's important that we are continuing to make financial reports to the elected leaders, and of course, to facilitate the spending and the collection of our monies, it's required that we have an annual budget as well. Of course, we'll talk about the annual financial report, the Form 7025, and the nuances completed with that. We'll also cover the need to have an annual audit of that. Now, that does not mean we have to go out and hire a CPA firm or anything like that. No, it's just our independent members will just verify that things are happening the way they should be. And then just a couple of closeout potpourri comments regarding finance as well. So this comes right out of the Auxiliary Manual. I couldn't have retyped it any better, so I just screenshot it. But all Auxiliary unit funds shall be promptly deposited to accounts containing the appropriate unit designation and the words U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. And we're allowed to use that taxpayer identification number, 52-1500576. We're allowed to use that on the accounts. That's the EIN that the IRS did assign to the Auxiliary, and we're all allowed to use that. You don't have to apply for a separate EIN. You don't have to use your own personal Social Security number. No, not at all. Now, just a quick note. If you set up an interest-bearing account, at times, if the words United States are not spelled out in the account title, but you've abbreviated it U.S., you may receive what's called a B notice from the IRS, indicating that the name and the employer identification number, that 52- number, don't match. Because when they applied way back in the 80s for the EIN, they spelled out the words United States. So the district actually got a B notice a number of years ago. They were going to start back up with a holding on our account until I changed the style of the account. So don't panic. If you see that, just have the bank or the credit union change the style from U.S. to United States. Okay? Now, when you establish the account, you may be asked by the new accounts rep to provide a certification of beneficial ownership under the control prong. Okay? Now, the Flotilla commander or the division commander or the FSOFN or the SOFN are control prongs under the regulation, and we can sign that certification form. It's called CDD on the bank side, okay? Customer due diligence. And we're the second of the 4 elements. We're talking about the second of the 4 elements here where the financial institution is required to identify and verify the identity of beneficial owners of legal entities. The humans who own or control. In this case, what we're focused on is the control of legal entities. No one owns us. We are an unincorporated association working with the government as part of the United States Coast Guard. But somebody's in charge, and that's all they're looking for. They're looking for the form to be completed, and someone's in charge. And so don't panic if they ask you to do that. Like I say, either the Flotilla commander or the division commander can sign that form under the control prong, and off they go. They'll be happy about that, and we'll go from there. So what they're doing, of course, is looking for the person with significant authority to control, manage, or direct, and that's what the division commander or the flotilla commander is as well. It may be a form that looks something like this, They'll ask for your name and title, date of birth, address, and social security number as well, okay? Now, given the fact that the general public really does not understand us and what we do, if possible, when establishing a new account, it could be helpful if you pick a financial institution where you are already a customer or a credit union a member. That way they know you coming in already because you've been banking with them, and now you're just opening an additional account. If that's not possible, though, if the new accounts personnel at the institution ask for documentation, what I have found useful is the Commandant's Auxiliary Policy Statement, okay, that is available out at the Chief Director's website. That really explains what we are and what our goals are, and of course it's signed by the Admiral as well. And then, if they ask for a copy of the IRS letter validating the EIN, that's available. You could provide that as well. In fact, you can get that from me if you need a copy of that as well. Okay, but it's just they don't understand us. They don't understand exactly what we are, and so sometimes it's helpful just to provide some supporting documentation so that they can just close the loop and have everything that they need to establish the account. Remember, we must deposit our funds into an insured financial institution. So you're looking for either, if it's a bank, an FDIC notice, or if it's a credit union, the NCUA insurance notice as well. And of course, all accounts are insured up to $250,000 in that. I don't believe any of us have anywhere near that kind of money within our auxiliary units in that. But so we will be under the minimums and we'll be protected from that standpoint as well. Now, talking about funds disbursement, it's always important to remember that disbursement of funds must always be used to further the general purposes of the auxiliary. In general, funds should not be accumulated without some definite goal in mind for future disbursement intended to promote authorized activities. Auxiliary unit funds may only be spent or committed with the concurrence of the appropriate majority of the voting members of that unit unless specific provisions authorizing the expenditure or commitment are in the auxiliary unit standing rules. That's why budgeting is so important, because then the membership, or at the division level, the division board can approve a budget that allows the normal types of bills being paid can take place without having to reconvene the membership every time. Auxiliary unit funds may be dispersed with the signature of the unit finance officer and or a unit elected officer as authorized in the unit's standing rules. So it's however that your group has set it up. Now, just a couple of thoughts on disbursement. Unit monies are there to spend and used to support the unit, the members, and the organization. Keeping tens of thousands of dollars in the account does nothing to maintain and grow our organization. Growing the bank accounts is not a goal for unit monies. With a few exceptions, the unit can spend funds however they vote to spend the money, so long as such supports the unit, ideally, again, through the budgeting process. Note, and I'm going to say this a couple of times, and it's really important to remember, public education fees may not be used for social activities. That comes right out of the auxiliary manual. It's section L. There's a section L just on public education course fees, what we can collect, and then what we can't use it for, which is social activities. So you can't have a class and then have a big party for everybody with those PE fees. Now let's spend a couple of minutes talking about dues. The auxiliary operates on a calendar year basis for finances and, most importantly, operates on the same basis for the collection of dues. Our members in our units at the flotilla level appearing on the rolls of the flotilla at year end, 12/31, are accounted for and billed for the annual dues. New members coming in during the first 3 quarters of the year are billed at a pro rata rate based on the quarter added to the rolls in AP status. Units at each level assess dues at a dollar amount based on the vote of the appropriate board of that unit. National bills the district bills the divisions bill the flotillas, and the flotillas bill the individual members, with each level adding its own amount to the subsequent invoice. Now, just a quick note at the bottom, district dues in 8ER have not been raised in decades, though National has raised the dues a couple of times. So the dues spread, what happens is, on an annual basis, National bills us $24 for each of our members in each of our units. Now, ADR adds its own $6, and like I say, it's been $6 for decades. And so the district will bill the divisions $30. Now, the divisions will add whatever their annual dues amount is. Let's say that's $10, and so they'll bill the flotilla $40. Now, the flotilla will add its piece. Let's say, and I'm just for example, the flotilla bills the members $10, okay? And so they would bill each member $50, all right? And so that's how it works. Now, then during the new members enrolled during the first 3 quarters, the first, second, and third, then a pro rata share of the dues. So, for example, National charges annually $24, but in the first quarter, any new member, they'll charge us $18. New members coming in during the second quarter, they pay $12, which is half of the annual. And in the third quarter, they only charge us $6 a piece. And so we subsequently do the same thing. We add $4.50, $3, and then $1.50. Any new member entering during the fourth quarter, we don't charge them quarterly dues. We just bill them for the next year. And that's what should be happening now, is that dues should be going out as well. The challenge, of course, is that everything is based on Flotilla membership at calendar year end. Flotillas need to be billing now for 2022. Should the member wish to retire or disenroll, and we don't want to lose members, absolutely not, but it's their discretion. If it's time for them to retire, it's time for them to say, I need to disengage, then they have to be out of the AUX Data 2 system before 12/31, as that is the roster that's used to determine the number of members to bill, starting at the national level and then working down the chain. It's critically important that the finance officers and the IS officers at the flotilla level track the removal of the members wishing to depart to ensure removal from AUX data. You may send in the proper forms that Anita talked about just a little while ago. You may send in the proper forms, but they never get through, okay? Something got lost in the mail or what? You need to be sure that you're tracking. And if things aren't getting removed, the folks in the director's office, Laura and Robin, are really, really good when they get the forms, but sometimes they don't get the forms. We know the mail's not, we're not going to talk about those problems, but it's just, they can only process what they get, okay? And so it's really important that we follow up, we follow through in that. Last line in red, so important. It's only when the member has been systematically removed from the AUX data system is when that member is removed and gone for dues billing purposes. And as I mentioned, we should be billing now. The first bills for next year should have already gone out to the flotilla memberships. For members who have not paid by October the 1st, the second billing can go out. Middle of October, then the flotilla leadership would still contact those that are in arrears to say, hey, are you going to stay? Are you going to retire? Are you going to leave? That way, then, the proper forms can be the process could be started on November the 1st, resolve any unprocessed members issued by the middle of November, and then everything to the HR no later than 12/1 so that Anita can get those in as well. It's really, really important. If we do our work now in this last third of the year, the bills will be clean, the invoices will be clean, and we won't have a lot of problems at year end. Now, of course, the division commander and the division board are entitled to and should receive financial information on the division's fiscal activities at each meeting of the division board. The members of the flotilla are entitled to and should receive financial information on the flotilla's fiscal activities at each meeting of the flotilla. So the D8ER or the flotilla commander will inform the finance officer what information they want and at what frequency they wish to receive it, though copies of bank statements and a financial recap could be included with each report. The report should be complete, thorough, and of course, easily digestible. It doesn't have to be pie charts and graphs and spreadsheets. No, you don't need all of that. Just basic, here's the income, here's the expenditures, this is what was approved, here's our remaining balance. It really is that simple when it comes down to the monthly reporting on that. Now, the finance officer, and again, these things are coming right out of the manual, and it was just easier for me to do a screenshot as opposed to type it all out. But the finance officer will make a financial report at each regular meeting of the flotilla, and of course, this comes out of the Flotilla Procedures Guide. See, you could replace the word flotilla with a division. But the report will include all receipts and expenditures since the last report, and the balance of funds remaining as of the day preceding the date of the meeting. Any emergency expenditures authorized by the flotilla commander, including in the reported expenditures, shall be so designated in the report. We're not talking a 2-hour report at each meeting. No, it shouldn't take more than just a couple of minutes. But hey, here's what we collected, here's what we spent, this is what had been approved. Was there anything extraordinary that had to happen? Okay, it's real simple. Okay, it's real simple. Now, to make the disbursement process so much easier is the annual budgeting process. And preparing an annual budget at any level allows for the payment of routine bills without having to convene the board or the flotilla membership to disperse routine funds. Extraordinary non-budgeted items will still need to go to the division board or flotilla membership before the expenditure is made. Routine expenditures, what are we talking about? We're talking about things like dues, public education expenses, awards, office and copy expenses. You might, when you do the budgeting, you might want to consider just a small line item called contingency, either flotilla commander's contingency or division commander's contingency, maybe $100. That way, if a member passes away, we can buy flowers at the funeral, or we can make a contribution in the member's name. Just a small stipend that allows them to, okay, we weren't planning on Bob dying, but we need to send some flowers. Yeah, and you could add that as a line item, and the members would say, oh, sure, absolutely, we need to be able to do that. Now, remember the last point, annual budgeting is required at both levels. So finance officers at both levels may have to remind the leadership of this annual requirement. Our elected leaders have a lot of things on their plate, and the last thing they're worried about is, oh, that's right, we need to do a budget. No, it's finance officers' responsibility to gently remind the leadership that, hey, by the way, we're going to have to do a budget at this meeting as well. Again, coming right out of the manual, to plan expenditures properly, every auxiliary unit should, there's the word, should, there's the word, should. And when you see should in a legal document, that means must, have a clearly established annual budget. An example of a flotilla budget is contained within the Auxiliary Flotilla Procedures Manual, okay? And things that, again, we could plan for. These are kind of routine obligations that come right out of that Flotilla Procedures Manual, okay? Purchase and engraving of awards, publishing costs of newsletters and notices, purchase of publication and training materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, once a year, every unit is required to provide an annual financial report using Form 7025, the financial report of an auxiliary unit. The purpose, of course, is to provide an annual accounting of all funds received, dispersed, and retained by each unit, and should be completed in conjunction with the annual audit of the unit financial records. The report is also used to transfer responsibility and accountability of unit funds upon the change of a financial officer and or the change of unit leader. Now, when you think about Form 7025, it's all about accountability. It's saying, hey, we've looked at it, everything balances, and we're going to sign off. We're going to say, yes, all the funds have been accounted for, all the funds have been spent properly, and everything's fine. It's all copacetic in that. Coming right out of the auxiliary manual, it talks about when the report has to be done. The auxiliary manual, the one that the entire nation uses, has a distribution where the flotilla commander actually sends the 7025 directly to the district commodore. We do it a little differently here in D8ER. There's a kind of a cover sheet that goes with the annual report, and as you see, and we like the way we do it because we think it just makes more sense. The flotilla commanders send them to division commanders. The division commanders look at all of the flotilla's reports in their region, forward it up to the DCAP. The DCAP then looks at all of the reports from his or her area and then forwards it to the district commodore, who then passes it on to the director. We like the way that flows, and it's okay to do it that way. The director's fine with our approach because, quite frankly, it just makes much more sense from that standpoint. The 7025 is a standard Coast Guard annual reporting form. The whole country uses it. Now, date on the front of the page says March of 2010, but trust me, we've been filing this form for decades, because if you turn it over and look at the instructions page, it references November of 1997, but I can guarantee you we've been doing something in this same format for a long, long time. Now, it's a national form used by all the units. There are categories on the form that won't be applicable to all of our units. For example, I suspect that none of us have utilities or buildings repair or maintenance in their line items, because we don't own buildings, and so we don't have utilities, we don't have maintenance, we don't have repairs and that. There are units in other parts of the countries, there are flotillas that own their own building, and so they have those kinds of things. And so given that it's a national form, we have to make some modifications to the form as well. And you simply you alter the line items on the budget as you fill it out. Budget the way you want, in the categories that you want. They can't tell you how to do the budgeting in the line items. That's just you'll just modify the form to do that. The math is not complicated when you look at the form, okay? You start with where you begin with the beginning balance, okay, which should map back to the ending balance in the previous report and match the bank records as well. You add the cash receipts, okay, that equals total cash items and receipts. You subtract the disbursements, that leaves the ending balance, which again should map back to the bank records that you have as well, okay? So really kind of straightforward. When you look at it, you've got money in a checking account. You may have savings in CDs. I don't know if any of our units have trust funds, but if you've got money in trust, that's fine. But that's where we begin, and you'll have, like I say, you'll have the bank statements that would support that as well. Cash in then dues, PE course fees. If you got any cash contributions to the flotilla, you would recognize that there. If you're getting routine contributions from a member whose employer is encouraging social involvement in that, they may want to run that through the auxiliary association as opposed to directly to the unit, because the auxiliary association is the 501c3 that's set up to deal with that as well. If you're running a little material center, uniform and flags, conferences and meetings, and then other cash items as well. The instructions sheet to the form talk about each of those as well. I'll say it again. It's important to account for PE course fees separately, as there are restrictions, and the restrictions are you can't use it for social activities. The auxiliary manual details the types of PE fees and how these fees should be reflected. And again, that's in section L like in Lima, in the auxiliary manual on publication course fees. There's custodial fees, course material fees, administrative fees, registration fees. There are remuneration fees, okay, which we don't get because we're volunteers. Course surcharges, and then, of course, once again, L7, Lima 7, funds collected from the sale of public education materials may not be used for social activities, okay? On the disbursement side, well, we're going to pay dues. We may have PE course expenses. Again, it just kind of runs down that, and then you get the general piece coming down to the ending balance itself, and again, that should match to the final bank balances as well. Now, I want to make just a couple of notes, just a comment on those two generals. You got a general disbursement under the category under the cash disbursements, and you have a general under the income as well. If it is a significant amount, all right, you should go ahead and attach a sheet that explains what those are, okay? What makes up that money. Now, if it's not very much, or it's just one category, there's one line there that you can use to that, but you can always use the outside column, or if you want to attach a separate sheet, the director's more than happy with that. The more clear, the more understandable, then that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to provide the reader at the elected leadership position a story of what's happened as well. The audit process, when you go through the auditing process, one of the things the audit committee may want to do is compare fiscal period to fiscal period. If significant variations period to period are noticed, then the explanations could be included in the comments to the financial report as well. For example, when we do budgeting at the district level, I try to provide the last 5 years worth of data just so that the division commanders that make up the district board can understand, okay, what have we been spending in each of these dues categories each year as we go on, and then if there is a variance, they can ask, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Okay. And then the ending balance, of course, it's just wherever you have the money, checking, savings, again, if you trust, and that you should have bank records that would support that as well. Accountability. It's so important, is the accountability piece right at the bottom. The financial report is to be signed by the preparer, who's normally the unit financial officer, and by the unit leader as the approving authority. In the event that either the finance officer and or the unit leader is being relieved, the report is also to be signed by the appropriate relieving officers. If approved, it's to be signed by the director, and if required by the unit or district policy, which is what we have here in D8ER, is also signed by the audit committee. Now, audit committee, all right? You don't have to go out and hire a CPA. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about members who do not have access to the bank accounts, just looking at the bills, looking at the invoices, looking at the collections and that, saying, yep, everything looks right, okay? This is not, let's go pay thousands of dollars to have somebody look at our books. No, absolutely not. Now, just a quick hint, all right? The finance officer, preparer, should sign both as the preparer and the relieving officer, assuming that they are staying on board. So the finance officer would be signing here, and assuming he or she is staying on board, they would sign as relieving officer as well, okay? Likewise, if the flotilla commander is the approver, okay, and they are staying on for another year, then they would be the relieving officer as well. Okay. Now, if it's changing, then the relief would sign, just like on the finance officer, the relief would sign. All right. And if for some reason in the middle of a term the finance officer would get replaced, then a report would be done, an audit would be done, and then the relieving officer would sign at that point as well. The audit committee would sign here at the bottom, and then at the bottom, the very last line, the director then signs off. And the commander has indicated she reads all of these. She reads all of the reports that we send in, okay? Now, one surprise to some people on the 7025 is, there's a unit inventory record on the back. Don't forget, turn it over, okay? Because the materials officer needs to complete that as well. That'll get returned to you should you not do that. Now, in terms of tracking all of these, one simple approach is to simply set up an Excel spreadsheet with a chart of accounts. The accounting the budgeting accounts that you set up can be as simple there with the dates and the amounts, and then it just gets transferred to the report. So you can do that on the deposit side, and you can do that on the expense side as well. Okay, you don't have to go out and buy QuickBooks. You don't have, no. Let's make it as easy. Okay, the KISS principle. Keep it simple. Okay, keep it simple. Now, the national standing rules, as well as our standing rules here in the district, require annual financial reports to be audited, and also require unit financial records to be audited when the finance officer changes as well. So the division commander and the flotilla commander should appoint an audit committee consisting of members of the division board or, at the flotilla, members of the flotilla who can review the records, receipts, and reports. These should be members who do not sign on the bank accounts that are involved. Okay? So should the DCDR or the flotilla commander fail to establish the audit committee, the finance officer gently remind that elected leader that such an audit review is required. Okay? And one last time, PE monies need to be used carefully and accounted for. The audit committee should verify the proper use of the PE monies. There's no social activities. Sorry, no parties. Even if it was the most successful class you ever had, you can't have a party with the PE monies as well. Now, just a couple of other things. Remember, from a potpourri standpoint, elected officers may not hold the appointed office of either the finance officer or the materials officer. So if you want to stay on the blue A side, okay, don't take the job as the SOFN or the FSOFN, nor take the job as the SOMA or FSOMA, okay? Elected officers may not hold the office of either finance or materials. Finance officers, we are the fiscal voice of the unit. We keep the bridge and the members informed of our unit's fiscal activities. We're expected to know the rules, and we can assist the elected leadership in following the fiscal rules, but more importantly, the finance officer protects the fiscal resources of the unit. We are the first line of defense when it comes to monetary integrity. So, Flotilla Staff Officer for Finance, if you have any questions, reach out to your division staff officer for finance. The staff officer for finances, if they have any questions, of course, they reach out to me as well. But I always follow the chain, and we can help you with that as well. But just remember, it is dues time. It's time to get our dues out on our dues billings out to the units so that our members who are going to depart, okay, we will wish them well in their next life, but we will get them off the rolls so we don't have to end up paying the national folks for those as well. Begin getting the materials together for the annual review at the flotilla level right after the end of the year, the January time frame, to get those flotilla reports into the DCDRs. We get that right after the holidays. We have to start focusing on, okay, let's close out the books, let's get the reports together, and we'll do that. My contact information is on the last screen there. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email or leave me a voicemail as well. Thank you for your attention. Finance is a very important product or a very important process within the auxiliary. It's not as exciting and glamorous as Aux Chef, okay? Makes me hungry, so it's a good thing we're coming up on a break right now. But if you have any questions, please contact us. And thank you for your attention this morning. Enjoy the rest of the conference as well.